Hey guys, Mr. V over here, doing a book review today for Anne Frank Remembered by Miep Gies. This is a nonfiction book about the woman who helped the Frank family while they're in hiding. And, this just shows what it is like living outside under Nazi rule. Now, I read this book right after I read Anne Frank's diary. I really enjoyed Anne Frank's diary. If you guys are curious, I have the book review uploaded, but I really enjoyed the book, even though it was a very sad book. I enjoyed just the perspective of seeing what it was like in hiding, whereas this book tells you what it is like outside under Nazi rule and the life that Miep lived and how she helped Anne Frank's family. And I have to say, I really enjoyed this book because you get a much wider perspective of everything. And you also get an interesting perspective from someone who was living outside of the hiding place. Miep, she is not Jewish, so she could live under Nazi rule, but she did not like the Nazis, and she was still trying to help the Frank family who was in hiding. And you get to see kind of what the life was like in the 1940s in the Netherlands. Now, Anne Frank's diary, it gave you the perspective of inside hiding. You could see what it was like inside hiding and the fear you are facing. Whereas this book shows what it is like living outside in the Netherlands and the fear you're facing in a different way under Nazi rule. So that's why reading them both together, I think, really helped give an overall perspective. Now, Miep, she was in her 20s or 30s when she was helping the Frank family, and she knew a lot more that was going on in the news and because when Anne Frank was in hiding, they couldn't really get much of the news. They could hear some of the radio, but not too much. Whereas Miep knew a lot more that was going on outside. But she also saw the lawlessness that was going on and the amount of thieves, the amount they were stealing outside in the Netherlands, and just the craziness that was going on outside of the hiding place. And she talks about it and just how crazy it was living under Nazi rule after they invaded your country. So that's why this book, I think, gives a much wider perspective of the whole Anne Frank situation. And it just shows what it was like living in some of those European countries in the 1930s, and specifically the Netherlands, but some of the ones that got invaded, and just what it was like, because about a third of this book just talks about Miep's life and just growing up in the 1930s and then what it was like in the 1940s. So I would say, I'd say she also gave a very interesting perspective of what it was like in the 1940s. Because, the Nazis were on the rise, and then they invaded the Netherlands, but the Netherlands did not go to war. Instead, they surrendered. And while they surrendered, the Nazis were still ruling the Netherlands. So they were still in there. So you still had to go under Nazi rule. And the book expresses many feelings. It expresses many feelings because the feeling of what it is like when your country was invaded. What are your thoughts? When your country surrenders, what do you do? Do you continue to work? Do you stock up on food? Do you join the movement from when the Nazis invaded? Do you join them? But you can't really express opposition to them, so what do you do? And the citizens are dealing with the Nazis to where she even says that some people would yell at the Nazis and then they got killed. So it's what do you do? And you have to walk that fine line of you don't really support them, but you can't show too much opposition to them either. And you have coworkers who are supporting the Nazis. So it's just, she shows all this in the book, and it just makes it very interesting. And just life, what it is like under the Nazi rule and the difficulties she faced. Not only living under Nazi rule, but then trying to help Anne Frank's family. Because Anne Frank's family was in hiding, and you could not be shown helping any of the family, or else you would yourself get arrested. So you had to take a big risk to help her family. But the difficulties of helping people in hiding. Because Anne Frank's family was in a different building, but she still had to get them food or different supplies for things. But how do you buy all that food? Because there was 8 people in hiding that she was helping, and she's buying food for her family too. So that's a total of 11 people. How do you buy food for 11 people without arousing suspicion? Especially when they were given food ration cards. So it's how do you do all that? And then even after you get the food, how do you deliver it to them? And she did it for multiple years. So she talks about that and just the tremendous risk she is taking. It is scary. I mean, yes, being Jewish under the Nazis was much more difficult, but if you were shown to help the Jewish, you would have been arrested too, and you would have been possibly killed as well. So she just shows all that in the book and talks about that in the book. And she just writes so many things in this book. I think also her writing style really helped because she kept it interesting. You weren't bored when reading the book. Not only the situation, but some of the simple things she would talk about, you would think, oh, that'd be somewhat simple. And then she'd write it in the book. You'd be like, oh, what would you do? For example, if someone in Anne Frank's circle, like when they're in hiding, where do they get sick? What do you do? Like, can you take them to the doctors or what? And like, then how do you do it? And without, again, getting caught. So she shows about all these little situations that she went through while helping the family. And again, it was her writing style, I think, really helped keep it very interesting. And then for those, I think, who have read Anne Frank's diary know that Anne Frank, their family got caught. And Miep writes about what it was like after the Frank family got caught. Because even though the Allies had invaded after D-Day, they invaded, Miep still lived under the Nazi rule for about a year after the Allies had invaded. So, because it took time to defeat the Nazis. And she shows that about like what it was still like living under that. Because it was still a very tough life. Even though the Allies were slowly defeating the Nazis, the Nazis weren't defeated yet. So you had to worry about businesses closing, the very little food. What do you do to get your clothes, coal, wood? Just everyone is still struggling. Like just everyday people are just struggling. And she writes about that after, about how she survived and some of the difficulties she faced after. And one of the biggest difficulties was she kept wondering what happened to the Frank family. And she couldn't really find out, but she was like, what happened to them? And later she did find out, so she writes about that in the book as well. And it's just, the book overall just shows the tough life she had, but how she survived and how she just continued to move forward with life and just try to make the best of all the situations. And I have to say that I really enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the book, especially because I just read Anne Frank's diary. And I'd say that this book gives like a much wider perspective. And I think you should read it. If you enjoyed Anne Frank's diary, you should read this one, because this one will give you a much wider perspective of what it was like. And you can just see what it was like for the person who helped the Frank family for all those years. So that's why I definitely recommend this book. If you guys enjoyed the book review today, hit the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. If you guys have any comments, have any questions, post it in the comment section below, because I always love hearing your comments, your opinions. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.